Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jesus Nazario. I will be today's moderator for today's session, Help Gap Year Master's PhD, Planning for the Years After College. Thank you all for joining us for the Graduate Diversity Admissions Fair in this plenary session on planning for the years after college. We'll be getting started in 2 minutes to give time to everybody to make it to the webinar. So we will get started in just 1 minute, but as a reminder, live captioning is available and this session is being recorded. We prepared a few questions for our panelists and we'd love to hear from you. So please submit your questions to the Q&A function when we get started so we can incorporate them throughout the session. It might not be possible for us to address all the questions, but you can always reach out to the Office of Graduate Diversity. I'll input the email right here, or to any of us at the Diversity and Community Fellows office hours. I'll have a slide for that shortly, but so it's 12:07, so we'll get started. If we could go back to the first slide, please. So as a reminder, if you're here, it is because you are attending the Help Gap Year Master's PhD, Planning for the Years After College session. My name again is Jesus Nazario. I will be the moderator for the session. And yeah, before we dive into the questions we have prepared, let's introduce our panelists. So we have 4 panelists today, and I'll let them introduce themselves. We can start off with Nikki.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nikki Lee, or Nicolette. I'm a 5th-year PhD student in the sociology department here at Berkeley. I don't know what we should go over exactly. My pronouns are they or she. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, if we can introduce ourselves, introduce your name, pronouns if you'd like, undergrad institution, and current department program.
Yes. Okay. The only thing I missed, I went to Brown University for undergrad.
Amazing. And Dorel, can we have you introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Good afternoon to all. Blessings and salutations. My name is Darrell. I present as he, him. I am a 2nd and final year Master's of Welfare, Social Welfare student, the MSW. My specialization is advancing health and well-being across the adult lifespan. My undergraduate degree was at a local university, Cal State East Bay, where I studied journalism. I'm happy to be here with you guys, happy to assist with whatever I can, hopefully to ease some of that anxiety as you transition on, but happy to be here.
Thank you, Doral. And Regina?
Hi, everyone. My name is Regina. I use she, her pronouns. I attended Vassar College for undergrad, small liberal arts in Poughkeepsie, New York. I'm currently in the psychology department. I'm a PhD student in my 4th year. I'm in the social personality area.
Amazing. Thank you. And Nafisa? Sorry if I mispronounced it.
Yeah, hi. My name is Nafisa El-Ghazali. My pronouns are she, her. I did my undergrad at the University of California, Irvine in Southern California. And I'm currently a 4th year PhD student in bioengineering, which is a joint program with UCSF.
Amazing. Thank you, everybody. So I guess there's a couple questions already in the Q&A section feature. But before we get started, before we answer those, I think we can get started with a pre-prepared question. So the question is, give us your story as you approach college graduation. What options did you consider after college? And yeah, what were you doing before grad school at Berkeley? And kind of what brought you to that specific degree? Does anyone want to get started with that question?
I can go. So as I mentioned, I went to Brown University for undergrad. It's in Rhode Island. I guess my path was slightly specific in that I was a Mellon Mays Fellow, so I was in a pipeline program for going to grad school, but even though that was the case on paper, I was still very unsure as to what it is I wanted to do after graduating and when I wanted to do it. My senior year was honestly a complete mess. I was very stressed and didn't know what to do. So while some of my friends were already planning their graduate applications that fall, I found myself in a position where I couldn't even think about trying to both write my thesis and apply for graduate school. So just because of where I was, like mentally, I decided that it would be best for me to take a year off. So, but then the next question was, what do I do on my year off, which we can talk about more later. But for me, I decided that even if I wanted to go into academia, that I needed some time to step away from all of that and kind of gather my thoughts and decide if I really wanted to go to graduate school. Because having talked to other grad students, it seemed like the kind of thing you should feel very sure about doing. So that's part of what inspired me to take time off, was to kind of say, that's a big commitment. You know, do I want to do it? How should I prepare for it? I wanted to have a long time to prepare to take the GRE and, you know, study and figure out things financially. So that was kind of my process. I just want to, you know, reassure people who feel very anxious about graduating or not knowing what they're going to do that that is a normal feeling, because I had no idea what I was going to do, but things work out. So that's kind of how I ended up here.
Thank you, Nikki. Anyone else want to share?
Should we go in the same order, Jesus? Maybe that'll be easier, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So I guess to really understand why I'm at UC Berkeley studying social welfare, you gotta kind of understand a little bit of my history. I worked in entertainment for 12 years, so this is totally a new career for me. My overall goal is to be a licensed clinical social worker, to work in direct practice and to provide therapy to underrepresented and marginalized communities. How I got there, during my later years in entertainment, I was working as a producer in radio, but then it spilled over into the film world, where I worked as production coordinator, production manager. And at that time, I developed some health complications, some mental health complications that stem from PTSD, that stem from anxiety and depression. And I started on this journey of health and wellness and sobriety. And through that journey, I discovered social welfare. I discovered licensed clinical social workers and what they do and how impactful they are in a direct practice space, but also in a macro space where they're dismantling oppressive systems and fighting oppressive practices. So now I am mature and sober, and I know I'm here to be of service to people and service to community in some sort of way. So the Masters of Social Welfare seemed like the right track for me to continue growing as a practitioner, but also as a documentarian, a social justice documentarian. So yeah, I think I answered all the questions, Jesus.
Thank you. Regina?
Yeah. So in my final year, I was in a cognitive science program for my undergrad. And so I was feeling very like tired and burnt out and kind of like done with school for at that moment. But I also knew that there was a part of me that wanted to go to grad school. And so I wanted to take a break to see like if with whatever I do during that break, I still feel like I want more training, I want more research experience, I want all these things to like pursue a career in academia or something related, then I will go and apply for grad school. And so I applied to different positions. I ended up getting a job as a lab manager. And so there I was the lab manager for a couple of years. I was in a lab that was like really supportive of like me kind of like, shadowing grad students, kind of getting the sense of like what like the life of graduate student is and like thinking through like research interests and like things like that. And so with that, I was kind of like able to cobble together like what it is I'm actually interested in studying in grad school. And once I figured out that, and I like started looking into different institutions to see like what professors were out there that were studying these topics. And when I found like a set of schools, and then from there I started applying. And so I was a lab manager for 2 years. And so that for me was like a good amount of time to do that, take the GREs and like feel more like prepared and less like I'm just, too burnt out and like trying to force myself to keep going when I'm like was not ready to. So that's why like I took that break. And yeah.
Thank you, Regina. Nafisa?
Yeah, so first off, I transferred. So in my 4-year, I felt like, I was just hitting the ground running, trying to kind of get research experience, etc. I did more biology research, and I was finding towards the end of like, as I got closer to graduation, I really wanted to do more materials and fabrication, like more engineering research. So I felt like, although, I knew I wanted to go to graduate school and apply, I also wanted to get more experience and more engineering. So I talked with my research advisor in biology, who recommended that perhaps I go into industry. And so that's what I did. I worked at a medical device company, and that really allowed me to get more of that experience I was looking for. But this now shifted like my area. So I felt like I needed extra time to not only like take the GRE, but get more experience. So I also did a postbac through the NIH, and I kind of had time in between both. So those are kind of the options. I didn't consider those options at first. I just considered working and then applying to graduate school. But then through that, I found the NIH postbac, and I did that, and it kind of unfolded from there.
Amazing. Thank you, Nafisa. So I think we definitely have enough time to cover most of the questions in the Q&A right now. I think we can start off with the first question, which is having a master's degree enough for a career in academia? Would anyone like to answer that one?
Jesus, can you repeat that one more time?
Yes. Is having a master's degree enough for a career in academia?
I guess I can take a stab at that. And I think it's fair because I'm the only master's student on the panel. The other lovely ladies are doctoral students. Congratulations. For my particular path, right, as a licensed clinical social worker, all you need is a master's degree and clinical hours before you can sit for the exam to be licensed. In terms of teaching in academia, a lot of professors at the School of Social Welfare at UC Berkeley don't have doctoral degrees. They're teaching with their MSWs. I don't want to sound discouraging. I feel everyone should follow the path that they feel is beneficial to their academic journey. But for my particular path, a master's degree was all I need. And to be honest with you guys and fair, I'm even contemplating a doctoral degree at some point. I haven't ruled it out yet myself. So I hope whoever asked that question out there, I answered it for you. And maybe some of the other ladies could add some value to the conversation.
Yeah, how would any PhD folks want to answer that for your specific discipline?
I feel like it might depend a bit on the field that you're trying to go into, which is why I don't think I can make a broad brush statement. Because I think there are different parts of academia a person can try to be in, whether you want to try and be tenure track and go into the professoriate, or whether you're more interested in working with students as like a lecturer or an adjunct professor. Because I think at least within sociology, it's pretty difficult to be going towards a tenure track position without a PhD, but that doesn't mean there aren't tons of useful things you can do with a master's degree in really any topic. So I would say within my field, it's quite difficult if what you're interested in terms of academia is becoming a professor. I think, unfortunately, because at the end of the day, a PhD is kind of just a title. I do think that they want you to have a PhD for that. But at the same time, like, you can do that at whatever pace you want. Or I know people who have just decided to like masters out of a program where, they realize partway through that I don't actually really see myself needing that whole doctoral degree. I'd rather just get what I got out of this master's and try and go for something else. So I would say it's difficult, but probably not impossible, at least in my field. But yeah, if the others have anything else to say, that's my perspective on it, at least.
I think that's really well said, both of y'all, Doral and Nikki. I will say in my field, ethnic studies, yeah, it's really hard to, like you said, get a tenure track position with just a master's, but a master's degree is kind of the minimum requirement to be a lecturer. So I think that applies in most fields, but yeah, great question. So for the next question, yeah, I think also really relevant for everyone here, all of our panelists. The question is, how/when did you decide out your areas of research interest for grad school? So more specifically, in PhD programs.
Are we going in order again, or should someone just jump in?
Someone could just jump in for this one.
I just talked, so someone else can go.
I don't mind going. The question was, how did you decide your area for graduate school, correct? I think I kind of mentioned it a bit, but through getting more experience within the type of research I was more interested or curious about, and having been able to work in those areas, it really helped me define kind of my specific niche and what I got really excited about and passionate about. That mostly came in my post-bac. And then through that experience, I knew, exactly what I really enjoy doing and the kind of research questions I wanted to ask. And that informed kind of how I selected graduate programs and even labs.
And I'll touch a bit on this as well. So I kind of mentioned it a little bit during my earlier question, but for me, it was through kind of the lab I was working with before coming to Berkeley. I had talked with the professor and with some of the other grad students, and they encouraged me to use one of our lab meetings to kind of as a space to think through kind of my different research areas and talk, have a conversation with people, kind of do a little presentation. And so through that meeting and other conversations further on, I was able to kind of think through oh, these are the topics that I'm interested in. These are the ways that I want to think about them. And you don't have to have a really fully formed research space for at least my program, I think some other programs as well. But if you kind of have general ideas of the kinds of questions that you're thinking about, the general space you're thinking through, and usually it helps to talk with other people, especially other people that maybe in the field, to kind of get a sense oh, what and do read some articles that it feels what has kind of been explored in that space and what's yet to be explored, that can be useful too.
Great, thank you both. Nikki, do you have any to add?
Sure. So I guess I'm coming from more of a social sciences angle, so I think it was a little different for me. I studied sociology and ethnic studies in undergrad, and now I'm doing my sociology PhD, so that's kind of my path. I kind of came up with my general research interests very like early in undergrad, and I've generally continued that large scale path. In undergrad, I studied the intersections of racialization and fatness as kind of physical social entities. And so I was still interested in fat studies and kind of the sociology of the body going into graduate school. But what I was told, and this is just other people's perspectives, was that you didn't really need to know like exactly what you wanted to do in graduate school. You just had to have a general idea and kind of logic around that idea. In fact, people told me like, don't be so like boxed in, like show that you have the capacity for like growth and change. So that's kind of what I tried to do on my applications. So I talked to my advisor and some other people, and I decided that I kind of wanted to pivot more towards medical sociology and think about the body in a medical context instead. So now I'm looking at weight loss surgery and the people who choose to get it in graduate school. But honestly, that idea didn't even fully kind of come together until like my second year of graduate school. So my first year here, I was just kind of like, here's my idea, I'm percolating on it. I talked to some faculty, and none of them were like, you have to know right now, you have to start doing research right now. It was kind of a process, and I kind of grew into it. So at least in my experience, there wasn't immediate pressure to be like, you have to have a perfect idea and know exactly what you want to do with it. I just took the time to be like, here's a space where I don't think people have done a lot of work yet.
Great, thank you for sharing, Nikki. As for this next question, I'm gonna, I think Laurel's the perfect person to answer this question. So it asks, can you still apply for a master's degree in social work with a bachelor's degree in liberal studies? Are there any prereqs needed?
That's a really good question. So for admission into the UC Berkeley School of Social Welfare, they ask for a bachelor's degree in any discipline. So that could be a bachelor's degree in dance, that could be a bachelor's degree in liberal arts, a bachelor's degree, what I have, communications journalism. I will say this, Jesus, a majority of the MSW students in my cohort have a bachelor's degree ranging from sociology to psychology to ethnic studies and liberal arts. So those are the majority of the most three. But yeah, you can be a social worker with any bachelor's degree. They will ask you for 1,000 hours of experience with human service. So like that could be you volunteering at a county hospital, or it's a variety of different settings, but they just want to see if you have the ability to interact with people in public settings. And so that's either a job or volunteer work, etc.
Thank you for sharing, Darrell. So for the next question, I think this applies to everybody. So how did you present? And I feel like a couple of y'all have kind of mentioned this already, but more specifically, how did you present your gap year on graduate applications?
I had a very boring gap year, so I want to represent everyone who didn't do anything very interesting on their gap year. I took one gap year. I worked at Trader Joe's on that gap year. I spent a bunch of time trying to find an amazing opportunity to prove how smart and intelligent I was to future application readers, but it didn't work out. So I ended up just taking a job in the same state that I lived in undergrad, and I worked at Trader Joe's. And I actually didn't really mention it much on my application. I think maybe if I were working in industry or something more related to my field, I would have. But if anything, how I mentioned it, I just kind of talked about how I took more time to really think about why I wanted to be in graduate school. And I felt more confident, I think, about applying than I would have as a senior, because I was able to take time and say, no, this is what I want to get out of it. I've spoken to people. I've spoken to, both my own professors that I had and maybe other professors at schools. So I think if anything, it translated into more confidence in terms of what I was doing and why I was doing it. I had time to reread certain books that I thought were important to my theoretical frameworks. So that's what I did. So maybe that's not as directly useful an answer to the question, but that's what I ended up doing, was trying to just take that free time to strengthen myself as a candidate. So maybe the others have more interesting answers as to how you can more concretely do that, though.
Thank you for sharing, Nikki. Would anyone want to take up that question?
Yeah, I can touch a bit on that. I think for me, it was kind of like because I was a lab manager, I was getting research experience. And so I kind of talked about how the research experience that I was getting was useful for a program in psychology. And so that's kind of how I marketed it. And just to speak to what you said, Nikki, I think like that is a really useful way to talk about, like, useful way for you to use your time to, like, think more about your topics and like work when like a job that like is like that you're able to acquire during that time. And I think it's like, that's not a boring answer. So I just wanted to say that quickly. But yeah, so for me, I just kind of like used that to like say like, oh, this is what the things I was thinking about, and this is the research I did. And I tried to make a link that showed that like, oh, the current research I was doing, even though it wasn't like completely related, this is how it could be related, how it could be applied, and the skills that I acquired could be useful for what I would do in a PhD program.
Thank you for sharing, Gina. If no one else would like to.
I don't mind going next. So I kind of framed it as like my story of how I got to like the final thing I landed on. I kind of talked about how in undergraduate, I really enjoyed my research, but it kind of left me curious about other things, and how to explore those other things. I worked in industry. And then I had intended to take 1 year, but I ended up kind of taking 2.5, like almost 3 years. So I talked about kind of how that industry experience led me to, it opened kind of another door, another curiosity, and then I pursued that. And so I just kind of mapped it out in my statement as like, this is the journey I went on that got me like the little pieces along the way that kind of completed this, like, I guess, roadmap for me. And I talked about also how each experience kind of carried with it kind of something I learned about myself and my research experience, and ultimately just painting them an entire picture, because like I switched around a lot. Like I did biology research, medical devices, and then like something different. And in between, I kind of like, I had periods where I wasn't doing anything. I had gaps where I wasn't, in industry or doing research, and, kind of traveling. And I just kind of focused more on what was relevant to the graduate school instead of giving every single detail, just to kind of paint my academic, my academic path for them, but also my career, my like passion and research interest path.
Amazing, thank you. Dora, would you want to speak a little bit more about your transition into, you mentioned it a little bit earlier, but.
Yeah, it's very similar to Nafisa's. My gap year was just kind of spent really reflecting and thinking about, the future and what I could do with the MSW, and more importantly, how I can profit from it. It's a very expensive program. So I really, really was in deep thought about like, if I'm going to go and invest in this master's degree, like how can I, find a fulfilling place. So, and a lot of that was wrapped into my personal statement. Why I want to be a social work practitioner. The gap year really just gave me time to think and to make sure I was making the right decisions about my future.
Thank you, thank you. So there's a couple questions here that might be applicable, not to everybody, but there are a couple. How do I phrase this one? So, for example, there's this question that relates to other questions being asked. So, being an international student, how can kind of work restrictions be addressed in essays? This is a very a couple questions in the chat are relating to being an international student. I'm not sure if anyone can speak to that, the experience of being an international student at Berkeley, and kind of how that, how statement of purpose was addressed. Just want to make a general question here if anyone could answer. Or speak to the international student experience.
I can't speak to international student experience, but I think you know, it is like relevant to like mention that in your essays and like mention like someone said something about like visa restrictions. Like it's important to mention like what the things that you kind of barriers that you may have faced and how you navigated those, so people understand that like your background and like where you're coming from and how like compared to someone else that doesn't have that same restriction. So like, even with this restriction, this is what I did and this is how I navigated my time.
Yeah, Jesus, I can't speak to the international student experience either, but I mean, what I do know is UC Berkeley is very welcoming to all students of all backgrounds and all ethnicities in the United States, but outside of the United States as well. So I do like what Regina offered. And I guess I can add just, you know, to try to be as compelling and authentic as you can in your statement and find something that's going to set you apart from other people.
Great advice, y'all. I would say as well, I would like to acknowledge that the international graduate student experience is different. There are unique struggles that have to be overcome, especially in regards to funding. I found that it's just it's less funding. There's a lot more funding available to US citizens, for example. But that said, there is a lot of support on campus. And I think it's important to also highlight. So hopefully that question is answered. And I think kind of at the halfway point. So I want to make sure we all kind of, we address the second pre-written question. So I'm going to ask this right now, put it in a little chat here. So in hindsight, what are some things you wish you knew prior to making your decision to come to grad school at Berkeley? I can kind of get us started. I will say visiting campus was something I wish I would have done. I'm a fourth year PhD student right now, and I kind of accepted not knowing about the campus culture or visiting campus. Fortunately, I will say it worked out in my favor. I feel very fortunate to be attending Berkeley as a PhD student. But that is one thing that kind of just put a lot of trust in the process. And yeah, it could have not worked out for me. Like, you know, I would have been like up the hill, like International House. That was a potential housing option I considered, but fortunately I got very affordable housing through the UC Berkeley co-op system. But yeah, would anyone, we can go in order if you'd like. So Nikki, if you'd like to go first.
Sure. So I will say that my department did offer visiting weekend and I was able to go, and most importantly, they reimbursed me. If it's at all possible, try and get reimbursed for all your visits to any school. They often will have the money hiding for it, but they don't want to offer it because they would have to give away the money. But luckily, Berkeley Sociology was nice enough to reimburse me, which was great because I was working slightly above minimum wage on my year off, and I lived cross country. But if there's anything, I kind of wish that I knew a little bit more about like the cost of living. I assumed, of course, that the Bay was going to be expensive. That's not really a secret, but I didn't quite know how expensive it was going to be compared to the amount of funding I receive as a graduate student here. So if I had really known what was going on, that might have been, I don't think enough to stop me from coming to Berkeley because I love it here, but it is something you have to consider wherever you apply. And of course, those factors can vary over your field of study, the school, the year even. So that can be a whole problem. But I think the other thing is to also just, I wish I knew how fickle faculty are, and that they can just leave and disappear and not be there at any given time. So, when I was applying, I was like, these are the faculty I really want to work with. This is like, these are going to be like the best people for me. And then you go, and then that person becomes the dean of some group on campus and you never see them again. So make sure you have the flexibility and have a good grasp on like the entire vibe academically of the department. Do they have people in your substantive area? Make sure there isn't just one person who you want to work with. Make sure there are multiple, because faculty transfer all the time, faculty retire all the time. So being aware of how chaotic academia can actually be, I wish I knew.
So I guess when I applied to UC Berkeley, I applied because I felt I would be doing myself a disservice if I didn't. Not that I wasn't qualified to get into the program, but there were a lot of applicants and I just wasn't sure if I was going to be selected, and I was. And at that time, I didn't know how I was going to pay for college or graduate school. I really didn't have any idea. I was like, oh, maybe I'll just max out my credit cards, or I'll like, beg my family for money or whatever, just go into debt. And so in hindsight, what I wish I knew is that UC Berkeley is a major institution with accessibility to a lot of financial resources. So just keep that in mind when you're applying. There are a variety of different outlets here at UC Berkeley to find money to subsidize the cost of your education. Every department is different, right? Like what we got going on at the School of Social Welfare will be different from sociology, which will be different from bioengineering, which will be different from psychology. So, don't be discouraged by the cost of education. Find a way to figure it out. And a lot of that is, doing a little extra work and, submitting applications and writing statements and submitting for different things. So yeah, that's in hindsight, like, don't stress yourself out on how you're going to pay for this. Don't let that be a deterrent to your master's or a doctoral degree. Like, if you have the will and the drive, you can find the money at UC Berkeley. I guarantee you that. Thank you.
Yeah, and kind of on both notes, like, I wish I knew to ask for like more of that, like support, like financial support, such as like a moving stipend. I didn't know that was like even an option. Even had I known, I would have felt like I couldn't ask because, this program accepted me, gave me a award letter, but like it would have helped a lot to know what questions I could like ask and what supports I could ask for, especially moving here in 2020. And my program required us to be here in person. More also, I wish I knew kind of like the funding logistics of the program. Maybe, I don't know if this is unique to a joint program, but the logistics kind of differed like from our first year, et cetera. And I kind of wish I knew to talk to the program admins more. I think like when deciding, you focus mostly talking to advisors and grad students, and not much time talking about to the admins, and the admins know everything. I also wish I knew kind of like the area, because the place you pick to go to grad school becomes your home, like whether it's a master's or PhD for X number of years. So like I knew nothing about like the Bay Area until I got here, and there's a few things that were kind of surprising, like the housing, etc. So I just kind of wish I knew to look into things outside of the program itself, and also with like those kind of little nuances within the program that you kind of find out once you're in, but you don't think about before.
Yeah, just to echo everything everyone has said. I wish I knew all of those things as well, and like more connected to like funding. I wish I knew kind of what resources were available for like applying for conferences, and especially like through my department, and whether or not like your PI, primary investigator, like for at least for the psychology department, that's what we call them. But yeah, they're knew like whether they're expected or not to like support you with conference travel and support you with other things as well, and like kind of like think through more about like the way funding is structured in my department, stuff like that. So I kind of wish I knew a bit more about those things beforehand.
Thank you, everybody, for sharing. Kind of related, so Ari's question is related to kind of what's been mentioned regarding funding. but more specifically, the attendee question asks, for anyone from a first-generation background on the panel, how would you describe the resources and the community on campus?
I can jump in. From first generation background, both like first generation from immigrant parents, but also to college, like first in my family to go to college and go to grad school now. The resources on campus have been really, really helpful to me. Like I was able to find community with other first generation students and like kind of help learn about kind of the hidden curriculum you don't really know about as a first generation student. I feel like I've been able to kind of find the supports within Berkeley and like the program that kind of best support me and fit my background. And without at first, like without these things, without knowing about them or connecting to them, it felt a little isolating. But Berkeley has so much to offer that I really felt like it made me feel more at home here and more supported, like more so than like I would have ever imagined.
Yeah, I'll touch a bit on that as well. And I'm also like first gen immigrants as well. Like I moved to the US like when I was really young with my family. And yeah, first to in this generation to go to like college and grad school as well. And so I think from all those things, kind of like navigating that, I've had to be very resourceful. So I'm always looking for resources. It's kind of like automatic for me to find out what is available, what like money, what kinds of things are available for me, and like what are the ways, how can I access them, who do I talk to, and how do I find community and like spaces. I especially like learned that from undergrad of like feeling very isolated when moving in, because like I went to a small school where like kind of half the students were not first generation at all. So like I felt like I had to like form community really early, and so I was able to like lean into that here as well.
Thank you both. Darrell, Nikki, would you like to speak on that?
So I'm not a first generation. My sister has a master's degree, so I won't be the first for that either. And I'm from the Bay Area. I was born literally a mile away from UC Berkeley, and I grew up in East Oakland. So like the Bay Area has been home for me for a long time. I like the word you use, Nafisa, community, because I definitely, despite, let's just say, despite like African Americans are the least represented on campus, or one of the least ethnic group that are represented on campus, I still do feel a sense of belonging and connection. And there are a lot of resources for you to find like-minded folk, for you to feel welcome to yourself. So there's a lot of clubs, services, diversity and community fellows. Like there's a lot of different clubs for you to feel welcome. I hope that helps, Jesus.
I can jump in really quickly. Sorry, Jesus, I feel like I cut you off. I'm also not first gen. Well, my father didn't get a high school degree. My mom did get a bachelor's degree, but I do identify as being low income, and I feel like both throughout undergrad and graduate school, I've been able to find community with first gen students and kind of bond over the similarities of those experiences, while also appreciating like the differences and finding community through that. And also, departments vary in size, but usually within a department, you can find at least a couple other people who kind of share those experiences with you. And even that's a sense of community. And if that doesn't work, then like everyone else said, there are a lot of amazing groups on campus, both geared towards a grad student specifically, and also geared towards the community at large, that I think can really give you a bedrock here. And also there are people like in Oakland and in Berkeley out there, I think every grad student should try and get out and exist in the actual like city that they live in. So that's also places to find connections with other people.
Great words from everybody. I will add as well just a couple cents. I'm also first gen and low income, and there's actually a graduate group on campus that began in 2020. It's called First Generation Low Income, vaguely. It's a grad group, and that's a kind of a student org where you can find community outside of Berkeley, there's also a lot of just a lot of, it's a diverse community, Oakland and Berkeley. I think in the Bay Area in general. So San Jose is very interesting, and a lot of Mexican American communities there. And I will say, as just first gen, there's a lot of resources as well. Like I think Berkeley, Darrell said it pretty well, where it's like Berkeley is a large institution, and I think a difficulty for a lot of first gen or just like grad students in general is figuring out how to navigate the institution, right? So there's talking to admin, talking to grad diversity admin as well, figuring out funding structures, right? Like I didn't know there was a difference between federal funding and state funding and external fellowships, internal fellowship. Like that funding structure is, really diverse. But I think, you can find folks that can support you navigate the funding infrastructure here at Berkeley, in addition to building community. So I will say that's really prevalent here. So for the next question, there was a question on family. Let me see if we can find it. Yes. So this person asks, I have a family with 2 kids and I'm planning for a PhD, mostly depending on funding and part-time jobs for financing my education in electrical engineering. How is the campus supportive for students with family? Would anyone want to answer that one?
I can jump in. To be clear, I don't have children or like a long-term partner in terms of a family, but there are many folks in my department who are student parents, and I've had undergrad students who are student parents. So I feel like I've learned a lot from them. The university does have and is actively trying to make more supportive experiences, access to funding, things like that for student parents. If anything, I would not let it discourage you from applying or thinking that you can do a PhD. You definitely can. From what I understand, it's easier if you have some kind of support from your partner to kind of really try and make the dual thing work. But it's not impossible by any means. And in fact, I think being a student parent only adds to kind of the richness you bring to your department and your campus. So I won't go on for very long because I know I don't have a lot of time, but I think it does require a little more planning, but I think parents tend to be good at planning more than I am anyway. So maybe that's second nature to you at this point.
Yeah, I definitely think that, and along with you, Nikki, I have people in the MSW program that are parents and that are making it happen. In terms of the part-time jobs, there are graduate student instructor and graduate student research positions open. So while you're a PhD student, you have the opportunity to apply for some of those paid positions, which could offset some of the money you'll be losing by leaving your job. There's also the UC Berkeley Parent Center, there's family housing, there's a variety of different resources for students that, are parents. So come, there's room for you here, definitely room for you here.
Definitely. I will say, yes, there's, compared to other institutions that I'm aware of, Berkeley definitely has a student parent center and even family housing available. There's also a couple grant opportunities. Like there's a wellness parent fund, I believe, that came out this month, which, I mean, it's not it's supportive for sure, I would say. There's always room to grow, but I think it's supportive. So for this next question, I think it'll be more applicable for Regina here, but other folks as well, perhaps. So the question is, I am an incoming transfer student wanting to go into a PhD program in psychology after graduation, and I feel like everyone has a head start. What can I do to deal with this anxiety?
Yeah, I will touch a bit on that. That's it's understandable that you have some anxiety about everyone having a head start, and that, can be attributed to imposter syndrome. But remember, you are here, you were able to transfer into here. And so that that already makes you very qualified for all the things you want to accomplish in the future. And I think if you're able to find ways to like engage with research, engage with like find community in your program and with like other people, like faculty members, et cetera, like speaking to them and getting it, like seeing if you're able to like work with them on different projects, if you're able to like attend lab meetings, things like that, to like kind of get a sense of like what is the experience of a grad student like, and talk to people that like reach out to me after this, but be able to like form those connections. I think that can like help you to reduce the anxiety that you feel around that. And there are many people that like do come into PhD programs that were transfer students in their undergrad years, et cetera. Like it's not uncommon. So you shouldn't like, while it's understandable you have that anxiety, I hope that statement itself reduces some of that for you, because like you are not alone in that experience.
Yeah, and just to add to that, just know, like, as a transfer student, you're just as qualified as everybody else. In fact, like coming from a transfer, like being a transfer, you kind of have this unique perspective and ability to be very resourceful. And you may have even found when you transferred that you kind of had some skills that maybe like starting at a 4-year you would also have, but like you kind of have it in a different, you apply it in a different way. And in graduate school, that resourcefulness that like transferring in, being able to adjust to a new area will help a lot, because essentially you will then transfer or like go on to the next thing. So you already kind of have shown that you have the resiliency when transitioning to a new space.
Thank you, everybody. So we have a couple more minutes. I think we'll take one more question and then we'll kind of close out. Okay, this is a good question. So, yeah, I think we'll ask this. So someone referenced the hidden curriculum of grad school. Would you be able to provide more description into that? So yeah, would anyone want to talk about what the hidden curriculum is and kind of, yeah, what are some things to be aware of when joining grad school?
I think I was the one who used that terminology. There are books on this out there, so I don't want to butcher too much, because there are some authors who have really detailed it. But I think one of them is called Getting into Grad School, or Getting What You came to grad school for. But just kind of there's some small things like, you know, when to contact an advisor, how to contact an advisor, how to keep connections going, how to like present yourself as like, or present your research, kind of like how to be strategic about like different fellowships. There are like a lot of different levels to what the hidden curriculum is, and it really depends on like what part you're talking about. But like just kind of some things that if you are first generation and you don't know anyone who went to graduate school or PhD program, or you don't have family, things that like some people know kind of going in because someone taught them, but you might not know because you're the first one ever in your like sphere to experience it. And so that's kind of also what I consider kind of the hidden curriculum. It's not obvious to you if you've never been exposed to it before.
Thank you for sharing, Nafisa, because I was like, what's that? I wasn't really sure what the hidden curriculum was, but my interpretation of it when you mentioned it, Jesus, was like, I found out so much about myself as a graduate student at UC Berkeley, in terms of like discipline and consistency and time management and professional courtesy and professionalism and professional communication. And I think a lot of those skill sets were embedded in who I was, but I've definitely sharpened them at the School of Social Welfare and at UC Berkeley, immersing myself in the culture of the institution and making sure I'm taking advantage of everything that is there to offer. So the hidden curriculum, I like that, Nafisa, but you're also gonna find out so much more about yourself through your graduate program. Yeah.
I can quickly share a thought as well. Yeah, you know, despite not being like first gen, no one else in my family has tried to get a PhD or really has any strong understanding of what grad school is really about or how to make it through it. So a lot of stuff I just didn't even know till I got here. And that was even with people trying to help me prepare to be here. So, kind of things that have come up, like how do you get funding? How do you get, research positions in like my field where you aren't like necessarily built in with like a PI or something? How do you, network with people? How do you market yourself? No one told me how to do any of that. I've had to learn through like basically other graduate students who have also tried to make this information available. And I think for a lot of us in marginalized positions, graduate school wasn't really made for us. So you kind of have to carve your own space and know that, kind of like Darrell said, you have all those skills already to succeed, but a lot of the information is opaque. So that can be really stressful. But I've dealt with that by reaching out to my peers and professors and really having to ask questions. But it's doable.
Okay, so with that, we'll be concluding our session. Thank you all for joining us. A friendly reminder, if you can always reach out to one of us, Diversity Community Fellows. There is a tiny URL here on the screen. And yeah, I think there's, we weren't able to get through all the questions, but there will be other sessions, other plenary sessions available throughout the week. One of them will be next month as well. There's an application hackathon I wanted to highlight for those that want to get kind of review, want grad students to review your application, your statement of purpose. But yes, thank you again. We will also share 2 emails for y'all to look at, our Office of Graduate Diversity email and our admissions email. But yes, thank you everybody for joining us, and hope to see you online or in person at some point. Thank you.